Introduction, good evening, and welcome to this journey into the world of ancient Greek philosophy. Tonight, we travel back through the centuries to a time when the thinkers of the Mediterranean first laid the foundations of Western thought. Imagine yourself in ancient Athens, walking slowly through the Agora, the bustling heart of public life. Here, citizens gathered to debate politics, to question the nature of justice, to argue about the soul and the cosmos. Close your eyes. Hear the chatter of merchants calling out their wares, craftsmen hammering bronze in nearby stalls, scholars speaking in animated tones. Feel the warm Attic sun on your skin, the sea breeze carrying with it the scent of olive oil and freshly baked bread. It is here. In this world of vibrant voices and endless questions, that philosophy was born. And it is here that you will meet the brilliant minds whose ideas still echo through the corridors of history, men who shaped not only how we think, but what it means to think at all. Our story begins with a name whispered across 25 centuries, Thales of Miletus. Thales of Miletus, around 624 BC, on the rocky shores of the Aegean Sea, a man walks slowly, watching the waves crash against the coast. His name was Thales of Miletus, and he would become remembered as the first philosopher of Greece. Imagine him gazing at the endless water, how it nourished crops, how it sustained animals, how it gave life to humankind. He observed how water could change form, liquid flowing in rivers, vapor rising to the heavens, ice hardening in the cold. He saw that, in one way or another, it was everywhere, and so Thales began to think in a way no Greek had thought before. To him, water was not merely a gift of the gods, it was the fundamental substance, the element underlying all existence. Picture him sitting by the sea, lost in contemplation, before finally declaring his revolutionary idea. All things are water. This simple but radical statement marked a turning point in human thought. No longer were answers thought only in myths or divine stories. Thales had opened a door to natural explanations, laying the very foundation for philosophy and science to come. Anaximander, the infinite. Our journey continues with Anaximander, the student of Thales, who lived around 610 BC. Picture the scene. Beneath the shade of an olive tree, a small group of eager students gathers. Before them sits Anaximander, deep in thought, drawing figures on a wax tablet. He is one of the boldest thinkers of his time, fascinated not only with the visible world, but with the hidden principles that shape it. Unlike his teacher, Thales, who believed water was the fundamental element, Anaximander proposed something far more radical. He spoke of the apeiron, the infinite, the boundless, the eternal principle that lay behind all things. Earth, air, fire, and water, these elements, he argued, are finite. They are born, they change, they perish. But the apeiron is limitless, imperishable, and eternal. It exists beyond human experience, beyond the senses, and yet it is the womb of all creation. From the apeiron emerge the opposites, hot and cold, wet and dry, light and dark. These forces clash, combine, and separate, giving rise to the countless phenomena of the world. Imagine mixing hot and cold water, and watching steam rise. This was how Anaximander saw the interplay of opposites, all born from the infinite. For him, the universe was not static. It was alive, dynamic, constantly changing. Worlds were formed, grew, and decayed only to be absorbed again into the apeiron, where the cycle began anew. And Anaximander added something more. Cosmic justice. The elements, he believed, pay retribution to one another. Fire consumes wood, but eventually water quenches fire. Day conquers night, only to give way again to darkness. This eternal balancing act keeps harmony in the cosmos, with the apeiron as the final arbiter. Now imagine Anaximander pointing to the stars at night, explaining to his students Even the heavens are bound to this law. They too are born, they grow, and they perish. Nothing escapes the cycle of the infinite. His ideas were more than speculation, they were revolutionary. He rejected the myth of a fixed, eternal cosmos. Instead, he gave us a vision of an ever-changing universe, governed not by gods alone, but by principles that hinted at natural law. The concept of the apeiron laid the groundwork for future philosophy. It invited men to think beyond the visible, to seek hidden truths, to imagine existence not as fixed, but as infinite. Anaximenes, breath of the cosmos, leaving the courtyard of Anaximander, we carry with us a sense of what yet our journey through Miletus is not over. Around 580 BC, another thinker rises. Anaximenes, student of Anaximander, philosopher of air and breath, imagine walking through the lively streets of Miletus, the sun shining brightly overhead, the aroma of herbs and spices drifting from market stalls. On a quiet meadow beyond the city, a small circle of students gathers. There stands Anaximenes, gazing upward at the open sky, lost in thought. Like his teacher and Thales before him, Anaximenes sought the arch, the fundamental substance from which all things are born. Thales declared it water. Anaximander proposed the mysterious, infinite apeiron, but Anaximenes lifted his eyes to the heavens and found his answer in air. Picture him lying in the grass, watching the clouds drift slowly, feeling the gentle breeze on his face. From these simple yet profound observations, he formed a radical theory. Air is the source of everything. It is abundant, invisible, and essential for life. Without air, man and beast cannot breathe. But air is not fixed, it changes form. By rarefaction, it becomes fire. By condensation, it thickens into wind, then cloud, then water, then earth, and finally stone. He demonstrated this with everyday examples, breathing warmly on the hand to feel heat, or blowing cool air across the skin. He noted how air feeds a flame, how it strengthens or quenches fire. Through such ordinary acts, he revealed extraordinary truths. For Anaximenes, air was more than matter, it was pneuma, breath, soul. Just as air sustains the human body, so too it sustains the cosmos. The universe itself was alive, held together and animated by the same breath that fills our lungs on a starry night. He explained to his students that the sun, moon, and stars were also forms of rarefied air set aflame. The heavens were not separate from earth, but part of the same great continuum, bound in the endless transformations of air. This vision challenged tradition. The cosmos was not fixed, eternal, unchanging. It was a living system, dynamic and unified. Anaximenes urged his followers to see the world anew, to feel the breath in their chest and recognize in it the very breath of the universe. Leaving his circle, we no longer take the air for granted. Through Anaximenes' eyes, it becomes more than the unseen, it becomes the life force of creation, shaping and sustaining all that exists. His legacy is the reminder that profound truths can be found in the simplest of things if only we look and breathe deeply enough. Pythagoras, harmony of the cosmos. Our journey through ancient philosophy now carries us across the sea to the island of Samos, around 570 BC, where we encounter one of the most enigmatic figures of all time, Pythagoras. Imagine arriving in a quiet coastal village, where the waves gently kiss the shore. The air hums with rumors of a wise man who had traveled through Egypt and Babylon, gathering knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and mysticism. Now returned to Greece, he teaches a vision unlike any before, a philosophy where numbers are not merely tools of calculation, but the very essence of existence. Pythagoras was not only a thinker, but also the leader of a devoted community, the Pythagoreans. Picture them gathered in a humble sanctuary, dressed in simple robes, chanting soft hymns. Their way of life emphasized purity, discipline, and the pursuit of wisdom. They lived communally, ate simple vegetarian diets, and revered the harmony of the universe. At the heart of Pythagoras' teaching was the conviction that number is the foundation of all things. Imagine him before a dark wooden board, chalk in hand, demonstrating to his students how mathematical ratios underlie music, architecture, and even the heavens themselves. He showed how the notes of a lyre correspond to simple numerical proportions, revealing the deep connection between mathematics and beauty. To his followers, this was nothing short of a revelation. The cosmos was harmony, and harmony was number. Numbers, to the Pythagoreans, were not just quantities, they were symbols with spiritual meaning. 1 represented unity, the source of all. 2 symbolized duality and balance. 3 was the perfect number, embodying harmony and synthesis. Picture them kneeling around a triangular altar, meditating on the sacred symbolism of the number 3. The triangle, a reflection of cosmic order among Pythagoras' contributions. None is more famous than the Pythagorean theorem. Imagine him drawing precise figures in the sand, showing that in a right triangle, the square of the hypotenuse equals the sum of the squares of the other 2 sides. To us, it is a mathematical law. To him, it was a window into the structure of reality itself. Geometry was not abstract, it was the language of the universe. Yet Pythagoras' philosophy extended beyond mathematics. He and his followers believed in the immortality of the soul, which passed through cycles of reincarnation. Around a glowing fire at night, he would tell his disciples of past lives, of lessons carried from one existence into the next. For the Pythagoreans, ethical living was essential, for only through purity and virtue could the soul ascend and escape the cycle of rebirth. Their community was secretive, bound by rituals and initiation. Imagine a young novice, nervous but eager, being admitted into the inner circle, all hidden symbols and sacred chants. Within these walls, knowledge was not mere theory, it was a path to transformation. Through Pythagoras' teaching, his followers came to see the universe as a living harmony, governed by divine order expressed through numbers. They were inspired to live with discipline, to seek knowledge, and to strive for spiritual purity. And so, as we leave the sanctuary of the Pythagoreans, we carry with us a sense of reverence for the hidden harmony that unites the cosmos, and for the mysterious man who first revealed it. Pythagoras' legacy whispers still, reminding us that truth may be written not only in words, but in the very mathematics of existence. Heraclitus, the philosopher of Flux. Our exploration of Greek philosophy now leads us to Ephesus, around 500 BC, where we meet a thinker as enigmatic as he is profound. Heraclitus. Picture the bustling markets of Ephesus, the scent of spices in the air, merchants shouting their bargains, the din of voices blending with the sea breeze. Yet, step into the shaded corner of a temple, and there sits a solitary figure, withdrawn, contemplative. His name is Heraclitus, remembered by his peers as the weeping philosopher for his melancholic nature and his conviction that life is ever-changing. Imagine him walking along the banks of the Cayster River, watching the waters flow endlessly past. You cannot step into the same river twice, he declares, for other waters are always flowing in. This insight becomes the heart of his teaching. All things flow pantare. Change is not accidental, it is the very essence of reality. For Heraclitus, the cosmos was not a collection of fixed objects but a living process, a constant dance of becoming and perishing. Like fire consuming wood, the universe itself was in a state of perpetual renewal, creation, growth, decay, and rebirth. The center of his philosophy was the concept of the logos, the rational principle, the hidden order that governs all flux. To the untrained eye, the world appears chaotic, but beneath the shifting surface lies structure, balance, and harmony. The Logos is the unseen thread weaving through reality, ensuring that the cosmos, though ever-changing, never dissolves into disorder. Heraclitus also turned his gaze upon human life. Conflict, he taught, is not a curse but a necessity. Just as the bow draws strength from the tension of its string, and the lyre produces music from the pull of opposites, so too does the universe thrive on struggle, war and peace, day and night, life and death. Each defines and gives meaning to the other. Without opposition, there could be no harmony. He urged his listeners to see unity in contradiction, that joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, birth and death are not enemies, but partners in the great cosmic dance. Only by embracing this unity of opposites could one glimpse the deeper truth of existence. Picture a disciple of Heraclitus, watching a butterfly emerge from its chrysalis, marveling at the transformation. In that fragile creature's wings lies the truth his master preached. Nothing stays the same, and in change lies life's meaning. Heraclitus's philosophy was not an abstract puzzle, it was a call to awaken, to see the Logos within the stream of change, to understand that permanence is illusion, and wisdom lies in accepting the flow of existence. And so, as we leave Heraclitus by his river, we carry with us a profound lesson. Change is not to be feared, but embraced. In the ceaseless flux of life, the Logos speaks. Parmenides, the philosopher of being. In contrast to the flowing river of Heraclitus, we now meet a voice of stillness, Parmenides of Ilia, in southern Italy. Around 500 BC, his philosophy stood as a direct challenge to the doctrine of change. Imagine a quiet coastal town, surrounded by olive groves and vineyards. In the shaded courtyard of a villa, columns casting long shadows across flowering plants, a group of students gathers around a dignified figure. This is Parmenides, preparing to unsettle everything his listeners believe about reality. Where Heraclitus declared that all is flux, Parmenides insisted the opposite. Change is an illusion. The senses deceive us, showing motion, birth, and decay. But reason, he argued, reveals a deeper truth. Reality is one, eternal, and unchanging. He taught the concept of being. Drawing a circle in the sand, he explained, being is like this whole, indivisible, without beginning or end. It cannot be broken or altered. It simply is. Then he posed a question to his students. Can something arise from nothing? The answer, for him, was obvious. From nothing, nothing comes. Therefore, if change implies things coming into being or passing into nothingness, then change is impossible. Being is, and non-being is not. What we perceive as multiplicity and transformation is but a fard, a mask over the true and changing reality. Parmenides gave poetic form to his philosophy in a mystical poem. In it, he describes a visionary journey, guided by a goddess who reveals the paths, the way of truth aletheia, where reason discloses the eternal unity of being, and the way of opinion doxa, where the senses entangle us in illusions of change and plurality. Only by walking the way of truth could one approach ultimate reality. His teachings forced his disciples to doubt the reliability of sense experience and to seek knowledge through pure reason. Imagine him walking with his students through the bustling market of Ilia, pointing to the swirl of voices, goods, and movement around them. All this, he says, is appearance. The truth lies beyond what your eyes and ears tell you. One student, inspired, sits later by the sea, contemplating the waves. They rise, crash, and vanish. Yet Parmenides' words echo. Perhaps the waves are illusions, while beneath them lies the eternal, unchanging ocean of being itself. The influence of Parmenides was profound. His claim that reality is unchanging became a cornerstone of metaphysical inquiry, compelling later thinkers to reconcile the tension between the world of sense and the world of reason. His disciple Zeno of Ilia would later craft paradoxes to defend his master's ideas, pushing the boundaries of logic, and so leaving the peaceful courtyard of Ilia. We carry with us the haunting possibility that beneath the shifting surface of the world lies an eternal truth, unchanging, indivisible, everlasting. Parmenides reminds us that reality may not be what it seems, and that reason, not the senses, is the key to unlocking its mystery. Empedocles, the four elements and the dance of forces. Our journey now carries us to the island of Sicily, around 450 BC, where we meet one of the most charismatic and mysterious figures of ancient thought, Empedocles of Agora. Picture yourself standing on a high cliff overlooking the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean. The warm breeze carries the fragrance of wild herbs and flowers. It is here, amidst this natural beauty, that Empedocles, philosopher, poet, and mystic formulated his vision of the universe. Empedocles taught that all matter is composed of four eternal elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Imagine him addressing an open-air amphitheater, his robes flowing in the wind, his voice commanding. He holds a handful of soil, letting it slip between his fingers, then gestures to the waves of the sea, the bright sky, and the blazing sun above. Each element, he explains, has its own qualities. Earth is firm and enduring. Water is fluid and life-giving. Air is light and sustaining. And fire is transformative and radiant. These are the building blocks of all existence. But Empedocles went further. He introduced two cosmic forces that act upon these elements, love and strife. With dramatic gestures, he describes how love draws the elements together into harmony and creation, while strife tears them apart in conflict and dissolution. The world, he says, is the stage for this endless dance, a cosmic rhythm of union and separation. Mountains rise, rivers flow, plants grow, and creatures live, all through the interplay of these powers. Empedocles' philosophy extended beyond the natural world to the human soul. He taught that our bodies, too, are woven from the four elements, and that health comes from their balance. Picture him advising his disciples on diet, exercise, and meditation not merely as physical practices, but as ways to align with the deeper harmony of the cosmos. To know the elements was to know oneself, and through that knowledge, to live in harmony with the universe. He was not only a philosopher, but also a mystic. Imagine him leading rituals in a sacred grove, invoking the powers of the elements, claiming the ability to heal the sick and even influence the weather. To his followers, these were not tricks, but signs of a man who touched the divine. His poetic work on nature brought his ideas alive in vivid imagery. Standing before an audience, he recited verses describing the eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, all driven by the shifting tides of love and strife. His words blended philosophy with poetry, reason with vision, leaving his listeners in awe. And then there is the legend of his death, one of the most dramatic in all philosophy. Believing himself divine, Empedocles sought to prove his immortality. He is said to have leapt into the fiery crater of Mount Etna, vanishing in a blaze. Later, only his bronze sandals were sped back by the volcano, a haunting reminder of his mortal fate. Whether true or myth, the story captured the imagination of generations, sealing his reputation as a figure half philosopher, half legend. As we leave the sunlit shores of Sicily, we carry with us the vision of Empedocles, a universe woven of four elements, forever shaped by the eternal forces of love and strife. His legacy is a reminder that behind the surface of our daily lives lies a deeper pattern, a cosmic dance in which we all take part. Anaxagoras, the cosmic mind, from the fiery legends of Empedocles. Our journey through Greek philosophy now brings us to the Ionian coast and then onward to Athens. Around 400 BC, Here we encounter Anaxagoras of Clazomene, a thinker whose ideas would transform the way humanity conceived of the universe. Picture Athens at this time, a city alive with ambition, art, and inquiry. Poets recite in crowded squares, statesmen debate in the Agora, and philosophers gather in shaded courtyards to unravel the mysteries of existence. Into this ferment arrives Anaxagoras, a man of calm intensity, armed with ideas that challenge both tradition and belief. Anaxagoras taught that everything in the cosmos is composed of infinitely small particles, what he called seeds, spermata, or homeomeres. Imagine him in the Agora, surrounded by curious listeners, explaining that all visible forms stone, flesh, fire, water are combinations of these seeds. Nothing comes from nothing, and nothing perishes into nothing. Instead, all things are formed through mixture and separation. But what made Anaxagoras truly revolutionary was his introduction of a principle beyond matter, nous, the cosmic mind. Unlike earth, air, fire, or water, nous was not physical, it was pure intellect, the ordering force of the universe. Nous set the cosmos in motion, separating chaos into form, organizing seeds into worlds, and guiding the dance of nature with purpose. Picture him drawing patterns in the dust of Athens, comparing nous to a craftsman shaping clay into vessels. Just as the potter imposes order on raw earth, nous imposes structure on infinite particles. It is intelligent, eternal, and infinitely subtle, possessing complete knowledge and control. To Anaxagoras, the universe was not born of chance, it was the unfolding of a rational design. He explained that nous initiated the great cosmic rotation, a vast whirl that sorted and organized the primordial mixture, giving rise to earth, water, air, and fire. Gesturing toward the heavens, he astonished his listeners. The sun, he claimed, was not a god, but a glowing stone. The moon was made of earth, reflecting the sun's light. To the pious, this bordered on sacrilege. To seekers of reason, it was revelation. Anaxagoras also applied this vision inward. The human soul, he taught, is a fragment of nous itself, our ability to think, to reason, to seek knowledge. This is the echo of the cosmic mind within us. Imagine him in spirited debate, insisting that our intellect is not merely human, but divine in origin, a spark of the universal order. His bold claims invited controversy. Some Athenians admired his rational explanations. Others accused him of impiety. Yet his influence was immense, especially upon Heraclitus, the great statesman of Athens, who defended and protected him. Later philosophers Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle would grapple with his legacy, refining the concept of reason as the guiding principle of the cosmos. As we leave Anaxagoras behind, strolling through the sunlit streets of Athens, we carry with us a new vision, that the universe is not chaos but order, not blind matter but intelligence. His nous, the cosmic mind, whispers to us still that beneath the stars and within ourselves lies the pulse of reason, weaving all into a single, intelligible whole. Democritus, the laughing philosopher and the birth of Atomism, continuing our journey through the rich landscape of early Greek philosophy. We now arrive in the bustling city of Agora, birthplace of one of antiquity's most influential thinkers, Democritus. Born around 460 BC, Democritus would be remembered as both a visionary of science and a laughing philosopher, a man whose cheerfulness and joy for life colored even his deepest inquiries. Imagine him walking through the crowded streets, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. To Democritus, philosophy was not only about abstract truth, but also about cultivating happiness. Knowledge, he believed, should free the mind from fear and bring lasting contentment. Building on the ideas of his teacher Leucippus, Democritus articulated one of the most revolutionary theories in history, atomism. Everything in the universe, he argued, is composed of tiny, indivisible units atoms moving through the infinite void. These atoms are eternal and unchanging, but through their countless combinations and separations that create the endless variety of forms we see around us, stars, rivers, trees, animals, and even ourselves. Picture him in lively debate, explaining with simple analogies. Atoms, he might say, are like the pieces of a mosaic or the colored shards in a kaleidoscope. By rearranging a few basic shapes, infinite patterns can emerge. Just so, all of reality is built from the ceaseless dance of atoms. Democritus took this vision further than physics. He claimed that even sensation, sweetness, bitterness, heat, sound arise from the shapes of atoms striking our senses. Smooth, round atoms produce the sensation of sweetness. Jagged, sharp atoms create bitterness. Where others invoked gods and spirits to explain the world, Democritus sought natural, material causes. For him, even the soul was made of especially fine, smooth atoms responsible for thought, perception, and life itself. At death, these atoms disperse back into the cosmos, dissolving the individual into the greater whole. From this, Democritus drew a profound conclusion. We should not fear death or long for an afterlife, but instead pursue a life of wisdom and joy in the here and now. His ethical teachings were as groundbreaking as his science. He taught that the highest goal of life was eudaimonia, a state of inner happiness, peace, and fulfillment. This could not be bought with wealth or secured through power. It was achieved through moderation, self-discipline, and a deep understanding of nature's truth. Imagine him telling his students, "Happiness belongs to those who live with wisdom, for when you understand the world, fear falls away." And joy remains, though many of his contemporaries dismissed his ideas. The seeds of his thought would blossom centuries later, profoundly shaping both philosophy and modern science. The concept of atoms, once speculative, poetic, even ridiculed, became the foundation of physics and chemistry. His vision of a rational, ordered universe governed by natural laws foreshadowed the scientific revolution, and so, as we close the chapter on the Socratics, we look back on an extraordinary journey, from Thales seeking the first substance in water, to Anaximander's infinite apeiron, to Heraclitus' flowing river of change, to Parmenides' unshakable being, to Empedocles' for elements, Anaxagoras' cosmic mind, and finally Democritus' atom-filled cosmos. These thinkers, bold and unafraid, stepped beyond myth to ask, what is reality? What is truth? They were not merely philosophers, they were pioneers. They walked into the unknown and stretched the horizons of human understanding. Socrates, the midwife of ideas. Imagine walking through the lively streets of ancient Athens. The air is filled with the shouts of merchants selling their wares, the laughter of children at play, and the constant murmur of debate. In the Agora, the bustling heart of civic life, citizens gather to discuss politics, trade, philosophy, and the nature of existence itself. Amid this crowd stands a man who does not draw attention through fine clothing or noble bearing. He is short, stocky, bald, with a face some might call plain, yet his eyes are piercing eyes that seem to look straight through you. This is Socrates for 170–399 BC. One of the most influential philosophers of all time, and as always, he is doing what he does best, asking questions. Socrates was born into modest circumstances. His father was a stonemason, teaching him the value of hard work and craftsmanship. His mother was a midwife, helping women bring new life into the world. From her, Socrates later drew an extraordinary metaphor. Just as she helped deliver children, he too was a kind of midwife, but of ideas. His mission was not to fill minds with doctrines, but to help others give birth to truths already within them. Unlike the sophists, professional teachers who charged fees for their lessons, Socrates refused payment. Philosophy to him was not a business but a duty. He walked the streets of Athens, speaking with anyone willing to engage, young men and elders, artisans and politicians. His only tools were conversation and questions. Picture him in the Agora, surrounded by curious Athenians. He poses a simple question: what is justice? The answers come quickly. Justice is paying debts, helping friends, obeying the laws. Yet with each reply, Socrates asks another question, peeling away assumptions. Soon, his companions find themselves in doubt, realizing how fragile their definitions were. This was the essence of the Socratic method, a relentless dialogue that exposed ignorance, not to shame, but to awaken. For Socrates believed that the first step toward wisdom was to know one's own ignorance. He once declared, "I know that I know nothing," and in that admission lay the spark of a new way of thinking, one that would shape philosophy forever. Socrates and the trial of truth. Socrates' method was deceptively simple, yet profoundly effective. He asked questions. This approach, now called the Socratic method, insisted of guiding his interlocutors through a chain of inquiries that gradually revealed contradictions, exposed assumptions, and led them toward clearer understanding. Picture a typical scene in the Athenian Agora. A proud politician, surrounded by admirers, boasts of his wisdom. Socrates approaches, not with accusations, but with questions. What is justice? What is virtue? What is the good life? At first, the statesman answers confidently. Yet, as the questions sharpen, his confidence falters. By the end, he realizes he does not understand the very concepts he claims to master. This relentless questioning earned Socrates the nickname of the gadfly, an insect that stings a lazy horse into movement. So too did Socrates sting Athens, refusing to let its citizens sink into complacency. He believed such self-examination was essential for virtue. As he would later declare, the unexamined life is not worth living, but probing questions are rarely welcomed by those in power. His challenges to authority, his exposure of ignorance, and his growing influence over Athenian youth stirred resentment. Many saw him not as a teacher but as a threat. The Legacy of Socrates. Socrates left behind no written works of his own. His legacy survives not in scrolls, but in the minds he shaped, the questions he asked, and the intellectual revolution he sparked. His true monument was not carved in marble, but in the long-lasting influence of his ideas. His most famous student, Plato, preserved his teacher's spirit in a series of dialogues. In these writings, the figure of Socrates lives on, always questioning, always testing, always guiding others to confront their ignorance and search for truth. Through Plato, the Socratic method became immortal. From Plato's academy emerged yet another towering figure, Aristotle, who took the questions of his teacher's teacher and forged them into systems of logic, ethics, politics, and natural science. Between them, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle became the unshakable foundation of Western philosophy. Reflecting on the life and death of Socrates, we see a man who devoted himself wholly to the pursuit of wisdom. He dared to challenge authority, to expose false certainty, and to remain steadfast to principle even in the face of death. His story is a timeless reminder of the power of critical thought, the courage to question accepted norms, and the humility to admit ignorance. As we conclude our exploration of Socrates' life, we carry with us more than admiration. We carry an invitation to become gadflies in our own time, to ask, to probe, to reflect, and to seek a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Now, with the memory of the man who refused to stop questioning, we turn to the philosophies his students built upon his example. Let us step into the world of Plato, and then Aristotle, and see how Socrates' spark of inquiry became the cornerstone of an enduring legacy. Socrates, virtue and self-knowledge. Imagine yourself once again seated in the Athenian Agora, among a circle of attentive listeners. The air hums with debate, but in this moment all eyes turn to Socrates, who begins another dialogue. His approach to philosophy was not the delivery of doctrines, but an interactive dialectical method, what we now call the Socratic method. For Socrates, philosophy was not abstract speculation, but a living practice. He believed that wisdom begins in wonder, and that truth is uncovered not by lectures, but by asking the right questions. Picture Socrates in conversation with a young Athenian about the nature of justice. He might begin with a simple question: what is justice? The youth offers a definition with confidence, only to find Socrates asking follow-up questions that reveal contradictions and gaps. What seemed clear becomes complex. What seemed certain dissolves into doubt. This process, often yielding more questions than answers, was not meant to frustrate but to liberate. Socrates' dialogues encouraged deep reflection and self-examination, exposing hidden assumptions and guiding others toward genuine understanding. His purpose was not to hand down answers, but to help others recognize the limits of their own knowledge. To know one's ignorance was, for Socrates, the first step toward wisdom. To see the heart of Socrates' teaching lay the conviction that the pursuit of virtue was the highest calling of human life. Unlike the sophists, who claimed that moral truths were relative and success was the ultimate measure, Socrates held that virtue is the greatest treasure, greater than wealth, fame, or power. To live in virtue was to live well. To neglect it was to live in ignorance and folly. He insisted that a life without examination, without striving for virtue and wisdom, was not worth living. The maxim carved into Apollo's temple at Delphi, "Know thyself," became Socrates' guiding principle. For him, self-knowledge was the foundation of virtue. To understand one's own soul, to recognize one's ignorance, and to seek continual improvement was the path to the good life. He taught that the soul is the true essence of a person, far more important than the body. The health of the soul depended upon living virtuously. To cultivate wisdom and virtue was to care for the soul. To neglect them was to corrupt it. In his famous Apology, delivered at his trial, Socrates described his life's work as a divine mission. Just as his mother had brought new life into the world, he saw himself as a midwife of ideas, helping others to give birth to truth. He told the Athenians that he had been charged by the gods to urge them to care less for wealth and power and more for their souls. By questioning, by probing, by awakening self-awareness. Socrates believed he served not only individuals but the entire city of Athens. His dialogues were not mere debate, they were acts of service, aimed at cultivating virtue in the heart of the polis. Socrates. Knowledge is virtue. Socrates is renowned for his bold claim that knowledge is equivalent to virtue. He argued that if a person truly understands what is right, they will naturally act in accordance with that knowledge. Wrongdoing, therefore, is not the result of weakness of will, but of ignorance. Imagine Socrates addressing a group of young Athenians in the Agora. He explains that when someone acts unjustly, it is not because they consciously choose evil, but because they do not yet grasp the full meaning of justice. To him, moral failure was always a failure of understanding. This view, known as ethical intellectualism, placed education at the very center of his philosophy. The path to virtue, Socrates insisted, runs through knowledge. To cultivate wisdom is to cultivate moral excellence. Because of this conviction, Socrates dedicated himself to conversation. He saw dialogue not as idle debate, but as the very tool by which the soul could be improved. By engaging others in questioning, he sought to awaken their awareness, sharpen their reasoning, and guide them toward the insights necessary for a virtuous life. He believed that every person, regardless of status or wealth, was capable of moral growth. The task of the philosopher was to serve as a guide, helping each soul progress toward greater understanding, and therefore toward greater virtue. In Socrates' world, to know was to live rightly. His philosophy invites us even today to reflect. If true understanding leads to just action, then our first duty is to seek wisdom, for only through knowledge can we hope to live a virtuous and fulfilling life. The Paradoxes of Socrates. Socrates is remembered not only for his questions, but also for a series of paradoxical statements sayings that appear contradictory at first, yet reveal profound truths upon reflection. Perhaps the most famous of these is, "I know that I know nothing." At first glance, it seems self-defeating. How can one claim to know something about knowing nothing? Yet within this paradox lies the heart of Socratic humility. By admitting ignorance, Socrates demonstrated the beginning of wisdom. Knowledge does not begin with certainty. It begins with recognizing the limits of what we believe we know. This paradox invited his listeners to set aside arrogance, open themselves to questioning, and embark on the journey toward true understanding. Another striking paradox is Socrates' claim that no one does evil voluntarily. To him, wrongdoing was never a deliberate choice, but the result of ignorance. If a person fully understood the harm their actions caused to others and to themselves, they would not choose them. Evil, therefore, was a shadow cast by the absence of knowledge, not the presence of malice. This idea was radical. It suggested that the cure for injustice was not punishment alone, but education and enlightenment. To teach someone truth was, for Socrates, to heal the soul that had been misled by ignorance. Both of these paradoxes reveal the spirit of Socratic philosophy, a philosophy rooted in humility, guided by reason, and aimed at the moral transformation of the individual. They remind us that true wisdom begins with acknowledging our blindness, and that virtue flows not from fear or compulsion, but from understanding what is good and right. Through these paradoxes, Socrates continues to challenge us not to accept easy answers, but to reflect, question, and seek deeper truths within ourselves. Socratic irony, another subtle but powerful tool in Socrates' philosophy, was what we now call Socratic irony. At first glance, it seemed as though Socrates was simply a humble questioner, professing ignorance and asking others to teach him. But beneath this mask of modesty lay a deliberate method, a way of guiding the conversation while appearing to follow. Imagine Socrates approaching a proud sophist in the Agora. With a gentle smile, he begins asking questions that sound like the inquiries of a simple man eager to learn. "Tell me, what is wisdom? What is justice? Surely you must know, for you are an expert." The sophist, flattered, launches into elaborate explanations. Yet, question by question, Socrates exposes contradictions, shaky logic, and hidden assumptions. What began as confidence soon crumbles into uncertainty. Here lies the essence of Socratic irony. Socrates pretended to seek knowledge while in fact revealing the ignorance of those who claimed to possess it. This method was not about humiliation, but transformation. By never directly declaring others wrong, Socrates avoided open hostility. Instead, he led his interlocutors to discover their own inconsistencies, forcing them to confront their lack of understanding. It was a way of challenging without alienating, provoking deep reflection without outright confrontation. The effect was disarming. His opponents often walked away unsettled, but wiser, compelled to think more carefully about their beliefs. Socratic irony was not a trick or deception, it was a strategy of enlightenment. By lowering himself, Socrates raised others to face the truth of their own minds. His irony highlighted the gap between appearance and reality, between what we think we know and what we actually understand. Through this method, Socrates turned dialogue into a mirror. And in that mirror, Athenians saw themselves more clearly, sometimes for the first time. The influence on Plato and Aristotle. The teachings of Socrates left a profound and enduring imprint on his students, none more so than Plato, and through Plato, Aristotle. Because Socrates himself wrote nothing, our knowledge of his philosophy comes primarily through Plato's dialogues. In these works, Socrates often appears as the central figure, questioning, probing, and leading discussions across a wide spectrum of themes: justice, virtue, knowledge, love, and the nature of the soul. Plato did more than preserve his teacher's words. He built upon them, weaving Socratic inquiry into a vast philosophical system. From the allegory of the cave to the theory of forms, Plato expanded the Socratic legacy into a vision of ultimate reality, where truth and goodness transcend the shifting world of appearances. Aristotle, Plato's most famous pupil, inherited both the spirit of inquiry and the drive for clarity. But where Plato reached upward toward ideals, Aristotle turned his gaze toward the concrete and the observable. He developed logic as a rigorous tool, explored natural sciences, ethics, and politics, and sought to organize knowledge into a coherent framework. In this way, Aristotle systematized the philosophical heritage that began with Socrates. His works became the foundation of Western intellectual tradition, influencing theology, science, and philosophy for centuries. Through Plato's dialogues and Aristotle's systems, the Socratic spirit lives on. It is a spirit of questioning, of relentless pursuit of truth, of humility before the limits of human knowledge. Socrates' insistence on virtue, his call to self-knowledge, and his recognition of the boundaries of understanding continue to shape philosophy today. His life and death remain a beacon, a reminder that wisdom is not the possession of easy answers, but the courage to keep asking deeper questions. As we conclude our exploration of Socratic philosophy, we carry with us his challenge to live examined lives, to seek truth with humility, and to let the love of wisdom guide us toward a fuller understanding of ourselves and the world. Plato, early life and education. Imagine yourself walking through the bustling streets of ancient Athens. Merchants call out their wares, craftsmen display their skill, and philosophers gather in the Agora, locked in heated debate. Among these thinkers, one figure would emerge with a unique blend of intellectual rigor and visionary ideas: Plato, student of Socrates, teacher of Aristotle, and a philosopher whose influence would shape Western thought for millennia. Plato was born around 427. He's enter an aristocratic Athenian family. His given name was Aristocles, but he came to be known by the nickname Plato, meaning broad, perhaps referring to his strong shoulders or expansive forehead. He grew up during the Peloponnesian War, a time of turmoil, political unrest, and shifting fortunes for Athens. From the very beginning, he lived in a world where philosophy, politics, and the fate of the city were tightly woven together, like other boys of his class. Plato received a traditional Athenian education: poetry, music, gymnastics, and rhetoric. But his true intellectual awakening came when he met Socrates. Under his teacher's guidance, Plato developed a deep interest in questions of ethics, politics, and the nature of knowledge. Socrates' relentless questioning and his refusal to accept easy answers left a lasting impression. To Plato, philosophy was not abstract speculation, it was a way of life, a constant dialogue with truth. The execution of Socrates in 399 BC devastated Plato. He saw in his teacher's trial the failures of democracy and the dangers of unchecked popular rule. This event was a turning point, shaping Plato's skepticism toward politics and inspiring him to seek a vision of justice that transcended the flaws of Athens. Around 387 BC, after years of travel and study abroad, Plato returned to Athens and founded the Academy, one of the first institutions of higher learning in the Western world. Situated in a grove dedicated to the hero Academus, the Academy became a gathering place for seekers of wisdom from across Greece. Here, Plato taught philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and the art of dialectic. The method remained dialogical in the spirit of Socrates, but the scope was broader, exploring not only ethical questions, but the very structure of reality. The Academy endured for nearly 9 centuries, nurturing countless thinkers, including Aristotle himself. It was more than a school, it was a living tradition of inquiry, a beacon of intellectual pursuit that carried Socratic questioning into the heart of Western civilization. Through his life and his academy, Plato transformed the grief of his teacher's death into a constructive legacy. What began as conversations in the Agora became a philosophical vision that still shapes the way we think about truth, justice, and the human soul. Plato and the theory of forms. One of Plato's most profound contributions to philosophy is his theory of forms. To Plato, the world we see and touch is not ultimate reality, it is but a shadow, a reflection of something higher and more permanent. The material world, with all its colors, sounds, and objects, is constantly changing. What we perceive with our senses is fleeting, imperfect, and incomplete. Yet beyond this shifting realm exists a timeless and changing reality made of forms, also called ideas. These forms are perfect, eternal archetypes. The physical things we see are only pale imitations of them. Every circle we draw will always be flawed, yet the form of the circle is flawless and exists beyond time and space. Acts of justice in our world are never complete, yet the form of justice is absolute. A beautiful face fades, but beauty itself, the form of beauty, remains eternal. In this way, Plato taught that true knowledge does not come through the senses, but through the intellect, which can grasp these eternal forms. This vision of reality is captured in Plato's famous allegory of the cave, found in the Republic. Imagine prisoners chained inside a dark cave. All they can see are shadows cast on the wall by objects passing before a fire. To them, the shadows are reality. But if one prisoner escapes and turns toward the light, he discovers a truer world, the objects themselves, and beyond them, the sun. For Plato, we are like those prisoners. Our senses show us only shadows of reality. The philosopher, however, breaks free, turns toward the light of truth, and contemplates the eternal forms. In the Republic, Plato applies the theory of forms to politics. Just as most people mistake shadows for reality, most rulers chase wealth, pleasure, and power instead of truth. Only those who grasp the forms, especially the form of justice, are fit to govern. Thus Plato envisions the ideal leader as the philosopher-king, one who seeks wisdom above all, whose soul has ascended from the cave of ignorance into the light of truth. The theory of forms remains one of Plato's most influential ideas, a bridge between the visible world of appearances and the invisible world of eternal truth. It challenges us to ask, are we living among shadows, or are we turning toward the light? Plato and the Philosopher-King. Plato envisioned an ideal society in which rulers were not warriors or politicians, but philosophers, those who loved wisdom and had ascended to the highest knowledge. Only the philosopher, he argued, truly grasped the eternal forms, the unseen realities of justice, truth, and goodness. Such rulers, motivated not by ambition but by duty, would govern reluctantly, compelled by their love of truth and commitment to the common good. Plato described a just society as divided into 3 classes, each embodying its own virtue. Philosopher-King's rulers, guided by wisdom, They direct the state with insight and justice, warriors guardians, embodying courage. They defend and enforce the will of the rulers, producers farmers, artisans merchants, practicing moderation. They sustain the economy and material needs of society, when each class fulfills its role in harmony. The whole state reflects justice, just as the human soul achieves balance when reason, spirit, and desire are properly ordered. Plato's vision is captured in one of the most powerful metaphors in philosophy. The allegory of the cave. Prisoners chained in a dark cavern mistake shadows on the wall for reality. Only when one escapes, painfully adjusting to the light, does he see the objects and finally the sun itself, the source of truth. The philosopher, like the freed prisoner, ascends from the shadows of illusion to the brilliance of the forms. Yet when he returns to liberate others, he is met not with gratitude, but with hostility and disbelief. This allegory reveals both the difficulty of enlightenment and the resistance of society to truth. It is also a metaphor for the philosopher's duty to return to the cave and guide others, despite the risks. Plato conveyed his philosophy through dialogues, written as conversations often featuring Socrates. Among the most influential are The Republic, a profound exploration of justice, The Soul, and The Philosopher-King. The Symposium, a dramatic series of speeches on the nature of love. The Phaedo, a moving account of Socrates' final hours, presenting arguments for the immortality of the soul. The Timaeus, a cosmological dialogue on the structure of the physical universe. The Meno, an inquiry into virtue and whether it can be taught. Through these works, Plato preserved Socratic wisdom while developing his own vast philosophical system. Plato's influence extends far beyond his own time. His academy, the first great school of philosophy in the West, shaped generations of thinkers. His student Aristotle expanded and challenged his ideas, laying the groundwork for science, logic, and metaphysics taught in the Middle Ages. Plato's thought merged with Christian theology through Neoplatonism. During the Renaissance, his works were revived, inspiring artists, scientists, and philosophers alike. Even today, Plato's vision of truth, justice, and the examined life calls us to look beyond appearances, to question the world around us, and to strive for wisdom. In Plato, we find not only a philosopher, but a visionary one who dared to imagine rulers guided by reason, a society shaped by virtue, and a reality illuminated by eternal truth. His works remain a lighthouse of philosophy, challenging us to turn from shadows to the light. Aristotle, the philosopher of many worlds. Picture yourself once again in ancient Athens, the city alive with debate, trade, and culture. Amid its crowded streets and lively marketplaces rises a young man from the small town of Agora, Aristotle. Though born far from the Athenian heart of philosophy, he would go on to become one of the greatest thinkers in Western history, shaping fields as diverse as logic, biology, ethics, and politics. His brilliance earned him the title of polymath, a master of many disciplines. Aristotle was born in 384, into a family steeped in medicine. His father, Nicomachus, was the personal physician to the king of Macedon. This early exposure to biology and natural science likely influenced Aristotle's later obsession with studying the living world. At the age of 17, he journeyed to Athens to study at Plato's academy, where he remained for 20 years. Although he deeply respected his teacher, Aristotle often disagreed with Plato, preferring observation and logic over abstract forms. Plato once affectionately called him the mind of the academy. After Plato's death, Aristotle left Athens, traveling to Asia Minor, and later to the court of King Philip II of Macedon. There, he took on a role that would echo through history. He became the tutor of Alexander the Great. The lessons of philosophy, ethics, and leadership that Aristotle imparted helped shape the mindset of one of history's greatest conquerors. In 335 BC, Aristotle returned to Athens and founded his own school, the Lyceum. Unlike Plato's academy, the Lyceum emphasized empirical research and systematic observation. Aristotle and his students, known as the Peripatetics, the walkers, would stroll through the colonnades, debating ideas while gathering knowledge from every corner of nature and human life. Aristotle's writings cover nearly every subject imaginable: metaphysics, politics, ethics, biology, rhetoric, and more. But at the heart of his philosophy were a few groundbreaking ideas. For Aristotle, reality is made up of substances, individual things that exist independently, like a tree, a horse, or a person. Every substance is composed of two principles: matter, the physical stuff it is made of, like wood in a tree, form, the structure, essence, or organization that makes it that particular thing. Matter and form together explain how a thing can change while still remaining itself: a tree losing leaves, but still being a tree. Aristotle asked, "What is the ultimate cause of motion and change in the universe?" His answer was the unmoved mover, a pure, eternal, and perfect reality that sets everything in motion without itself being moved. Unlike Plato's abstract forms, Aristotle's mover is dynamic, a divine intellect engaged in perfect thought, the highest reality to which all things are drawn. Aristotle was not only a philosopher, but also a scientist at heart. He dissected animals to study anatomy, catalogued plants, developed rules of logic, and analyzed political constitutions. He saw philosophy as inseparable from careful observation of the natural world. His ethics emphasized the pursuit of the golden mean virtue as a balance between extremes. His politics sought to understand the best forms of government. His metaphysics explored the meaning of being itself. When Aristotle died in 322 BC, he left behind a body of work so vast that later scholars called him simply the philosopher. His influence stretched through Rome, the Islamic Golden Age, and the Christian Middle Ages, where Thomas Aquinas wove Aristotle's thought into theology. His methods of logic shaped science for centuries, and his vision of reason and observation still forms the foundation of modern inquiry. With Aristotle, the journey of Greek philosophy shifts from the realm of abstract ideals toward the world of experience and analysis. Where Plato urged us to look upward to eternal forms, Aristotle invited us to look outward to study life, nature, and human action as they truly are. Aristotle and Ethics, The Path to Human Flourishing, his masterpiece. The Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle asks one of the most timeless questions: what does it mean to live well? For Aristotle, the answer is found in eudaimonia, a word often translated as happiness, but better understood as flourishing or living a life of fulfillment. It is the highest good, the ultimate purpose of human life. Everything we do, our choices, our ambitions, even our smallest actions aims at this end. But how do we achieve it? Aristotle teaches that the path to eudaimonia is through virtue. Virtue is not a gift, nor something we are born with, it is something we cultivate. Just as a musician becomes skilled by practicing scales, or an athlete improves through constant training, so too do we become virtuous by making good choices again and again, until they form the habits of our character. Virtue, then, is excellence of character, a harmony between reason and action, forged by practice and reflection. Central to Aristotle's ethics is the idea of the golden mean. Every virtue lies between two extremes, one of excess and one of deficiency. Courage lies between recklessness, too much, confidence and cowardice, too little. Generosity lies between wastefulness, giving too much, and stinginess, giving too little. Honesty lies between boastfulness and self-deprecation. The virtuous person is not one who avoids risk or passion, but one who finds the right balance at the right time, for the right reason. This balance is not the same for everyone, it depends on the situation. the person, and the context. Virtue is not about rigid rules, but about cultivating the wisdom to act well in each moment. For Aristotle, ethics is not merely about avoiding wrongdoing, it is about becoming the best version of ourselves. A flourishing life is one of reason, virtue, and balance, where we develop our unique human capacity for rational thought and moral choice. To live well means to act with integrity. To choose moderation over extremes. To cultivate courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. To care for the soul as much as the body. Thus, the good life is not a matter of wealth, fame, or pleasure. It is about aligning our actions with virtue, finding harmony within ourselves, and contributing to the greater good of society. Aristotle's ethics still resonates today, because it is both practical and profound. It does not demand perfection, but rather growth. It reminds us that happiness is not something we stumble upon, it is something we practice into existence. Aristotle and Politics. In his work Politics, Aristotle extends the insights of his ethics into the realm of society and government. Just as the individual seeks eudaimonia, true happiness, and flourishing, the purpose of the state is to help its citizens achieve this good life. For Aristotle, the state is not merely a place where people live together for survival. It is a community of virtue, a structure designed to guide its people toward excellence and fulfillment. In this sense, politics is an extension of ethics. Both aim at the good life, but one at the level of the individual, the other at the level of the community. Aristotle carefully examined different systems of rule, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. Monarchy ruled by one can provide strong and decisive leadership, but it risks turning into tyranny if corrupted. Aristocracy ruled by the best ensures that the most capable and wise hold power, but it may devolve into oligarchy, where a few rule for their own gain. Democracy ruled by the many reflects the will of the majority, but it may slide into mob rule if unchecked, instead of choosing one form. Aristotle proposed a mixed constitution, a balance of monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. Such a system, he argued, could combine the strengths of each while minimizing their dangers. Aristotle's vision of politics was deeply practical. He believed that the state exists not simply to protect life, but to make life worth living. A well-ordered government is one that fosters virtue, encourages education, ensures justice, and helps its citizens flourish both as individuals and as members of a greater whole. The citizen, in turn, has duties to participate in civic life, to uphold justice, and to contribute to the harmony of the community. In this way, Aristotle saw politics as a partnership, a shared effort in the pursuit of the good life. Aristotle's political thought profoundly shaped later generations, influencing Roman theory, medieval philosophy, and modern ideas of constitutional government. His belief in balance, moderation, and the moral purpose of politics still echoes in contemporary discussions about justice and the role of the state. Aristotle reminds us that the question of politics is not merely who rules, but to what end do we rule? For him, the answer is clear: to cultivate a society where citizens can live fully, wisely, and well. Aristotle and Logic. Aristotle is often celebrated as the father of formal logic, and for good reason. His contributions shaped not only philosophy, but also the very structure of reasoning that guides human thought to this day. His collection of works on logic, known as the Organon instrument, became the foundation of deductive reasoning. While the term may sound technical, at its core Aristotle's logic was about something simple yet profound: how to build sound arguments and draw reliable conclusions from what we know. Aristotle's most famous tool was the syllogism. A syllogism is a kind of logical argument where you begin with two statements called premises, and from them draw a third statement, the conclusion that must follow if the premises are true. For example, all humans are mortal. Socrates is a human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. It may seem obvious, but this structured form of reasoning was revolutionary. With syllogisms, Aristotle gave philosophers, scientists, and thinkers a way to move from known truths to new ones with clarity and consistency. Aristotle's system provided a framework for distinguishing between valid and invalid reasoning. By setting rules for argument, he ensured that debates and investigations could rest not on emotion or rhetoric, but on evidence and reason. For centuries, this logic was the standard method of intellectual inquiry. It guided medieval scholars in theology, Renaissance scientists in discovery, and remains a cornerstone of philosophy and mathematics today. Aristotle could not have imagined how far-reaching his logical tools would become. His ideas laid the groundwork not only for philosophy, but also for modern disciplines like mathematics, where deductive proofs follow the very patterns he outlined, law, where arguments are weighed for validity and consistency, computer science, where algorithms and programming languages echo the same principles of structured reasoning through logic. Aristotle gave humanity a gift, the ability to think with greater clarity, rigor, and precision. His legacy is not merely in abstract thought, but in every field where clear reasoning is required. In many ways, Aristotle gave us not just ideas, but a method for thinking itself. His logic is the compass that continues to guide us through the complexities of knowledge. Aristotle and Biology. Among his many contributions, Aristotle's work in biology stands out as one of the most remarkable. While some of his predecessors relied heavily on speculation and abstract reasoning, Aristotle turned instead to observation and experience. He believed that to truly understand life, one had to study it directly. Through careful examination of the living world, Aristotle dissected animals, studied their development from birth to maturity, and meticulously recorded his findings. His major biological works, History of Animals, Parts of Animals, and Generation of Animals, represent some of the earliest attempts to create a systematic science of life. One of his most important contributions was classification. Aristotle distinguished animals by their characteristics, noting, for example, that some creatures possess blood while others do not. This insight effectively separated vertebrates from invertebrates, a step that, while not precise by modern standards, was groundbreaking for his time. By grouping animals according to shared traits, he laid the groundwork for later taxonomy and the scientific study of biodiversity. Aristotle's curiosity extended beyond description. He wanted to know why creatures were built the way they were. He asked questions like, why does this animal have this feature? What purpose does it serve in survival? This teleological approach, seeing parts of the body as adapted for specific functions, allowed him to connect structure with purpose. Though some of his conclusions were mistaken, his method of linking form, function, and environment was revolutionary. Before Aristotle, many explanations of life were wrapped in myth, tradition, or divine stories. By turning to empirical observation and recording what he saw, Aristotle began to free the study of biology from speculation. For example, he described marine animals in detail, noted how bees organized their hives, and studied the development of embryos. He moved knowledge away from mythic storytelling toward disciplined inquiry, where evidence guided theory, while later science corrected many of his specific ideas. Aristotle's method left a lasting mark. He pioneered systematic classification of organisms, titled anatomical observation, the search for patterns and purposes in nature. In doing so, he transformed biology from a collection of scattered observations into the beginnings of a scientific discipline. His influence extended through medieval scholars, Renaissance naturalists, and even into the birth of modern biology. Aristotle's biological writings remind us of the power of curiosity and careful observation. Though he lived more than 2 millennia ago, his insistence on looking at nature directly and asking why it is the way it is remains at the heart of science today. Aristotle and Physics. In his treatise Physics, Aristotle explored the fundamental principles that govern the natural world. He was not interested in physics as we think of it today, formulas and experiments, but in the underlying causes and purposes of motion, change, and existence. His goal was to understand why things move, transform, and exist in the way they do. For Aristotle, the material world was composed of 4 basic elements: earth, water, air, and fire. Each had its own natural tendencies and place in the universe. Earth and water naturally moved downward. Air and fire naturally rose upward. This simple framework explained everyday observations. Stones fall to the ground, while smoke drifts skyward. Though later replaced by modern atomic theory, Aristotle's elemental model represented a major step in humanity's attempt to explain the workings of nature systematically. Aristotle distinguished between 2 kinds of motion. Natural motion, when something moves according to its own nature, for instance, an apple falling from a tree, violent or forced. Motion, when an external force compels something to move against its nature, like a stone being thrown into the air. This was a revolutionary way to think about movement, giving structure to observations of the physical world. One of Aristotle's most enduring contributions was his theory of 4 causes, a framework for understanding not only how things happen, but why. Material cause what something is made of. For example, a statue is made of marble. Form will cause its shape, structure, or essence, the design of the statue. Efficient cause the force or agent that brings it into being, the sculptor's work. Final cause its purpose or ultimate end, to honor a god, to decorate a temple. This idea of looking for multiple levels of explanation especially. The final cause or purpose became central to Aristotelian science and philosophy. Aristotle believed that everything in nature is in constant change, moving toward its natural state or goal. This teleological view, understanding nature in terms of purpose, shaped Western thought for centuries, while later thinkers like Newton challenged Aristotle's physics, replacing his models with precise mathematical laws. The questions Aristotle asked about causality, purpose, and the principles of motion laid the foundation for the scientific method itself, even though his physics is no longer accepted in modern science. Aristotle's insistence on seeking causes, patterns, and principles marked a profound step in the transition from mythological explanations of the world to systematic inquiry. His vision turned the study of nature into a discipline of reasoned investigation. Aristotle on the Heavens. In his treatise on the Heavens, Aristotle set out a vision of the cosmos that would shape human thought for nearly 2 millennia. At its heart was the geocentric model, the belief that the Earth stood fixed at the very center of the universe, while all celestial bodies, the sun, moon, stars, and planets, moved in perfect circular orbits around it. For Aristotle, the Earth was a stable, immovable core. The heavens, in contrast, were a realm of purity, perfection, and eternity. This distinction reflected his broader philosophy. The world of human experience was marked by impermanence and change, while the heavens embodied divine order and constancy, unlike the 4 earthly elements: earth, water, air, and fire, which were prone to change and decay. Aristotle proposed that the heavens were composed of a 5th element, or ether. This divine substance was incorruptible, eternal, and perfect, fitting for the realm of the stars and planets, where earthly elements sought their natural place: earth and water moving downward, fire and air rising upward. The heavenly bodies moved endlessly in circles, the most perfect form of motion. For Aristotle, The cosmos was a harmonious, rationally ordered whole. He argued that celestial bodies moved in eternal circular paths, driven not by chance but by the action of divine reason and expression of the ultimate intellect that kept the heavens in motion. This cosmology provided not just a physical explanation, but also a philosophical reassurance. The universe was purposeful, ordered, and intelligible. Aristotle's geocentric universe was accepted for centuries, deeply influencing astronomy, philosophy, and theology alike. His model was integrated into the work of later thinkers, most notably Ptolemy, and became the foundation of the medieval worldview. It was not until the 15th and 16th centuries, with Copernicus' heliocentric theory and the later work of Galileo and Kepler, that Aristotle's cosmos was fundamentally challenged. The discovery that Earth itself was in motion and not the center of all things sparked a scientific revolution, even though his specific model of the heavens was replaced. Aristotle's approach to understanding the cosmos left a permanent mark. His insistence that the universe followed rational laws and ordered principles helped lay the groundwork for future astronomy, from Aristotle to Copernicus to modern astrophysics. His On the Heavens represents a crucial stage in humanity's long journey of discovery, where wonder, philosophy, and science first began to map the stars. Aristotle's cosmos may no longer describe the physical universe, but his vision that the heavens are knowable, structured, and guided by reason remains a guiding spirit in the history of science. The Legacy of Aristotle. The influence of Aristotle on future generations of thinkers is truly immeasurable. His works were carefully preserved, studied, and expanded upon for centuries, first by scholars of the Islamic Golden Age, and later by medieval Europe, where they became the foundation of scholastic philosophy. Through translation and commentary, his ideas passed from Alexandria to Baghdad, from Córdoba to Paris, shaping the very framework of Western thought. In the Islamic world, philosophers such as Avicenna ibn Sina and Averroes ibn Rushd engaged deeply with Aristotle's writings, blending them with their own insights and passing them on to Europe. By the 12th and 13th centuries, Aristotle's works were rediscovered in the Latin West, where they transformed theology, philosophy, and education. His insistence on logic, observation, and rational explanation gave medieval scholars the tools to analyze both faith and reason. Universities placed his texts at the core of their curriculum, and for centuries, to study philosophy meant, above all, to study Aristotle, though some of his specific scientific ideas were eventually overturned. Aristotle's methodological legacy endured. His approach, classifying, observing, and seeking causes, prepared the ground for the scientific revolution. Thinkers such as Galileo, Copernicus, and Newton defined their own discoveries in contrast to, or in dialogue with, Aristotelian concepts. Even as his geocentric universe was replaced, his vision of a cosmos governed by rational laws remained a guiding principle. In ethics, politics, and logic, Aristotle's contributions remain foundational. His ideas about virtue, balance, and the pursuit of flourishing eudaimonia continue to shape modern moral philosophy. His theories of government influenced political thinkers for centuries, while his development of formal logic provided the intellectual architecture for reasoned debate well into the modern age. Looking back, Aristotle emerges not just as a philosopher, but as a polymath, a mind whose insatiable curiosity touched every domain of human knowledge: biology, physics, logic, rhetoric, metaphysics, politics, and beyond. His desire to understand the world, paired with his systematic method of inquiry, left an indelible mark on civilization. Aristotle shaped the way we think, learn, and seek truth. His works remind us that knowledge is not a finished monument, but a living journey of questioning, testing, and discovery. His voice, echoing across millennia, continues to inspire those who strive to uncover the mysteries of life and to live with wisdom, virtue, and understanding. The Hellenistic era, Stoicism, Epicureanism, and Skepticism. After Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, the Greek world stretched from Egypt to the Indus, its cities stitched together by trade, armies, and a shared language. The old civic certainties of the polis gave way to vast kingdoms and cosmopolitan capitals: Alexandria, Pergamon, Antioch, where a person could feel at once liberated and small. Philosophy answered this new condition not with myths of origin, but with practical blueprints for living. Three schools came to the for Stoicism, Epicureanism, and Skepticism, each offering a different therapy for anxiety, change, and chance. In Athens, around 300 BC, Zeno of Citium began teaching beneath the painted colonnade the Stoipoikao and gave his movement its name. Stoicism starts from a bracing claim: only virtue is good, only vice is bad, everything else is indifferent. Health, wealth, reputation, even good luck, these can be preferred or dispreferred, but they are not what make a person admirable. The core is the dichotomy of control. What is up to us? Our judgments, choices, intentions. What is not? External events, other people's opinions, the role of fortune. Align your will with what reason shows you can govern. Meet the rest with equanimity. To live according to nature meant, for the Stoics, to let reason logos guide action, to fulfill our roles as social, rational beings within a larger cosmopolis, a world city where every human is king. Later Stoics turned this ethic into daily practice. Premeditatio malorum. Rehearse setbacks in advance to blunt their sting. View from above. Imagine the earth from a high vantage to shrink petty fears. Evening review. Examine one's day. Where did I act wisely? Where can I improve? Roman voices carried Stoicism into the mainstream. Seneca counseled power with restraint. Epictetus, once enslaved, taught freedom of the mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote a private handbook for public duty. Sickness, bereavement, failure, these, said the Stoics, are inevitable, but how we respond justly, courageously, with self-command remains ours. A short walk from the city walls stood the garden of Epicurus 341 to 70 BC. There, philosophy was a quiet experiment in friendship. Epicurus defined the highest pleasure not as luxury, but as ataraxia, a steady calm of body and mind, and aponia, the absence of needless pain. He classified desires: natural and necessary food, shelter, friendship, natural but unnecessary elaborate delicacies, and vain fame, endless wealth. Fulfill the first, enjoy the second sparingly, ignore the third. Epicurus' physics and updated atomism carried a startling comfort. The gods, if they exist, dwell in perfect serenity and do not intervene. The soul is material and dissipates at death. Therefore, death is nothing to us. When we are, death is not. When death is, we are not. Fear of divine wrath and of the afterlife, he argued, is the root of much human misery. Remove that fear, and a modest life among friends becomes enough. In the garden, the curriculum was humane. Cultivate friendship, practice frank speech, choose simplicity, savor intellectual delights, and keep the mind free of superstition. Epicureanism did not preach excess. It taught measure a way to be satisfied with little, and thus to be free. Meanwhile, Pyrrho of Elis and later the academic skeptics in Plato's academy asked a disarming question. If our senses mislead and our reasoning is biased, how can we ever claim certainty? The Pyrrhonian answer was not cynicism, but method. Practice epoch the suspension of judgment whenever evidence is inconclusive. Live by appearances and ordinary customs, but refrain from absolutist claims about what things are in themselves. The surprising result, they said, is ataraxia, tranquility. Much human distress arises from the need to be right, to nail down the ultimate nature of things, let go of dogmatism, follow what seems provisionally, revisably. For the academic skeptics like Arcesilas and Parmenides, some impressions are more persuasive than others good enough for action, never final for metaphysics. In a plural, changing world, intellectual humility becomes a peace-preserving art. Though they often argued, the three schools overlapped in crucial ways. Therapy for the soul, each treated philosophy as medicine for anxiety. Character over circumstance, whether through virtuous Stoics or prudent choice Epicureans. The inner life mattered more than fortune, calm as a goal. Ataraxia is explicit for Epicureans and skeptics, but Stoic apathy of freedom from destructive passions seeks a similar poise, reason as guide. Even their disagreements assume that life should be led by reflective judgment. The Hellenistic age replaced the intimate city-state with sprawling empires. Old civic identities frayed. Individuals moved, traded, and served under distant kings. In this fluid, precarious world, philosophy pivoted from grand systems of nature to how one ought to live when control is limited and change is constant. Stoicism offered duty, dignity, and universal citizenship. Epicureanism offered simplicity, fearless friendship, and freedom from superstition. Skepticism offered humility, flexibility, and relief from dogma. Their influence traveled far into Roman ethics, into early Christian debates about virtue, providence, and conscience, and into modern programs of cognitive therapy and secular well-being. When news cycles and markets lurch, a Stoic asks, "What is up to me right now?" Then acts where agency exists, when status anxiety bites. An Epicurean pairs desires to the natural and necessary, invests in friendship, and remembers that enough is a feast. When arguments calcify, a skeptic suspends judgment, listens, and acts on the most persuasive evidence without turning today's model into a new dogma. The Hellenistic philosophers wrote for people living between world citizens of many cities, exposed to novelty, fortune, and risk. So are we. Their counsel is not a museum piece, it is a toolkit. Cultivate virtue and agency. Simplify desires and cherish friends. Question certainties and keep the mind serene. Between chaos and control lies a human space you can inhabit with clarity, courage, and calm. Conclusion. Imagine ancient Greece a vibrant place where philosophy was not merely studied but lived. The questions posed by Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the Hellenistic philosophers still echo across centuries. They remind us to pause, to reflect, and to seek wisdom not just in books, but in the way we live our daily lives. Their pursuit of truth, their courage to question, and their longing for clarity in a world of uncertainty are as relevant now as they were in the bustling streets of Athens. Socrates challenged us to know ourselves. Plato invited us to look beyond appearances. Aristotle taught us to balance reason and observation. The Stoics, Epicureans, and skeptics offered tools for inner peace in a turbulent world. Thank you for joining me on this journey. As you continue your own path, may the eternal wisdom of these great thinkers inspire you to keep searching, keep questioning, and keep growing. Carry their insights with you, and let philosophy be not only a subject you learn, but a compass for living.